Welcome to the Le Col Cycling Club. I'm Chris OP and this is our first ever Ask the Coach video. Last week we introduced what Ask the Coach is. It's over on the LCCC website. If you haven't already been over there, go and visit it now, drop us a question, or you can drop your questions in the comments box down below. This week we're going to be talking about descending, pacing, eating on the bike, and when we should rest. We're going to start with resting because rest is best. The first question is from Roberto and he wants to know how often you should have a rest day. Is it better to have a rest day or to go for an easy ride? And also how many days should you train hard before you do have a rest day? And it's quite simply a really easy one. I think you should always have at least 2 days every week which are dedicated towards rest or recovery. Maybe one as a complete rest day and the second one as a very, very gentle ride. But most cyclists make the mistake of either riding too far on their recovery day or at too high an intensity. The best thing to do is to think of your recovery ride as like you're going for a walk on a bike. You really need to keep that intensity really, really low to allow your body to soak up the adaptations that you've been trying to make with your training. Conducting your recovery ride really couldn't be easier, at least it shouldn't be anyway. It simply is the act of getting on your bicycle and pedaling nice and gently for around 30 to 90 minutes. It really is a very easy exercise. You'll barely even know you're doing it, unless of course your legs are heavily fatigued. As for how many hard days we should be having between our recovery rides, we think around 2 to 3 before having an easier day is a really good place to start. This will depend largely on your experience and your training history, but if you do one intense ride, perhaps on a Wednesday, and a slightly longer ride on a Thursday, maybe a morning commute and an evening commute, something like that, and then a nice recovery ride on a Friday before a slightly more intense weekend, that will set you up really nicely. And you can repeat this cycle 2 to 3 hard days, a recovery ride, 2 to 3 hard days. I would like to emphasize though that there is no really solid scientific evidence saying that a recovery ride is better than a rest day or vice versa. It really is up to your own personal preference. If you live somewhere where it's really sunny and nice and flat and you can go out for that really short, gentle ride that's similar to a walk, then a recovery ride will probably be more mentally rewarding than having a complete day off. Hopefully you found that useful, Roberto, and you enjoy your cycling. Question number 2 is about pacing, and this one is in from John. John simply wants to know how can he better pace his efforts. Now I think the most important thing to decide first off is how long your effort's going to be. If it's going to be a 20-minute effort and you only need to complete one of them, then you want to aim to finish the 9th or the 20th minute, 19th, 20th minute at your absolute limit. You want to slowly build up the intensity throughout that 20-minute period, aiming to cross the line, whether that's a timer on a stopwatch or if it's an actual physical finish line, with nothing left in your legs. If the interval is going to be around 30 seconds, then you won't need any pacing whatsoever. You can just go at it as hard as you possibly can. And that's almost true up until that 60-second period. If, however, it's a 100-mile bike ride, well, then it's a completely different story altogether. Learning how to pace your ride, whether that's a time trial, a hill climb, or indeed a 100-mile century ride, is one of the best ways and the most effective ways to help you get more out of your riding. We actually have a really good pacing video with Dame Sarah Story, which is going to go live very soon, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. Next up is a question from James, and that's about one of my favourite topics, which is food, of course, food and nutrition. James wants to know if the 60 to 100 grams of carbohydrates you should look to consume per hour on the bike for optimal fueling of intense exercise should include carbohydrate that also is ingested via fluid. And the answer is simply yes, it does. You can ingest your carbohydrates much more readily and easily if they are in fluid rather than in solids. This is because your stomach's going to be working incredibly hard to try and digest solids whilst you're exercising. Obviously your stomach isn't going to have quite as much blood flow through it whilst exercising. Hopefully it's going to be in your muscles. So it really is a beneficial idea to try and consume some of those carbohydrates through fluids as well. James is going to be riding up Mount Tyder, and that's why he wanted to know that. It's going to be an incredibly brutal climb, but hopefully you'll enjoy the descent on the way back down. And talking of descending, that leads us nicely on to the final question, which is from Adam, who wants to know how he can look to improve his descending. Now, we always recommend the best way to improve your descending is practice, but practice following a more experienced rider who's not riding on the limit. It's really important that when you are practicing any sort of technique out on the roads, you're not riding at your absolute limit. Rein it in to around 8/10. That way, if something does go wrong, you slip on a little piece of gravel, you puncture perhaps, you have that wiggle room, that get out of jail free card, meaning that you're not going to come tumbling down onto the tarmac, because that always hurts. Pay attention to how the experienced riders adjust their speed before the corner, how they adjust their body weight over the bike, which brake are they trailing, which one are they pulling on first, how hard are they braking, things like this. Build up a catalogue of experience in loads of different scenarios. That way you'll understand exactly how much grip you have at any given time. That also includes bike setup as well. You want to make sure that your tyres are inflated to the correct pressure for the types of roads you're riding and the conditions that you're going to find on those roads. We actually have a really good video with Fabian Cancellara already on YouTube talking about descending. We know exactly how good he was at descending in his career. Hopefully you find those tips useful, Adam. You can put them to good use on your next ride.
Please, when you go downhill, first of all, look at you, go your speed and feel comfortable, because if you don't feel comfortable and you are a bit nervous and no, I don't want to go too fast, but your colleague's going super fast down, that's already where I think the first mistake starts, because I mean, it's a small adaptation, because not everyone can handle speed with 70 kilometers an hour or 50 or even 90 kilometers an hour.
That is it for our first ever episode of Ask the Coach with the Le Col Cycling Club. We've already answered some questions over on the Ask the Coach page of the LCCC site. If you haven't seen it yet, head over there and have a little look around. You can even submit your questions for next week's episode there, or you can drop them in the comments box down below. Check out the other videos that we've thrown to throughout this video. They are linked in the description below, and we'll see you again next week.